Hi, folks. I welcome you all to my webinar, which is held today to explain and discuss how and why cyber threat intelligence is an important partner in the risk management function. Before we formally begin, let me take a moment to introduce myself. I'm Muneeb Imran Shaikh, having speciality in cyber threat intelligence. I have recently established a complete cyber threat intelligence function working for one of the organizations. And besides that, I have the specialty towards information security governance and risk management. If any one of you wants to stay in contact or have any questions after this session, or you can ask me the questions during the session. Or if you want to contact me or connect with me for anything, you can connect me over the LinkedIn ID, which is given below. I recently wrote two white papers, and one was on the establishment of complete cyber threat intelligence function, and the other one was on cyber threat intelligence, a partner in risk management. And this is what I intend to discuss today. So, before we formally begin to discuss how and why cyber threat intelligence is an important partner in the risk management function, it is important to establish the context and understand the problem itself, or the challenges, I would say. So let's first begin by understanding the role of security leadership, and the challenges that these security leadership, often face. So when it comes to responsibility, these chief security professionals are primarily responsible for enacting high level policies and mechanisms that establish and maintain a secure posture to enable the organization in seeking and attaining its mission, its goals, or its objectives. However, the challenges are that these CISOs, or let's say chief security or privacy officers, often have tight financial budgets, and because the implementation of security by itself does not reap any monetary benefits. So these challenges require a thorough understanding of the risk spectrum and intelligent allocation of the budgets to relevant risk response or risk treatment options that they have. And what I've argued in my paper is that, and this is my conviction too, that what distinguishes individuals, societies, or the organizations from each other is their capacity to plan, or to address the challenges and seek out opportunities for growth and value creation in the society. So, risk management is that discipline which enables the individuals or the society or the organizations to address the challenges that they are facing, or they are likely to face in achieving their mission or their objectives. So it helps them in pursuing the opportunities for growth and value creation. Therefore, risk management is a reflection of maturity and demonstration of due care and due diligence, contrary to the notion of blindly accepting the risk and the challenges, and moving on from one crisis to the other, uh, and considering that to be resilience. So, however, that being said, obviously it takes substantial time to have an effective risk management program, established in any organization to deliver its intended objectives. So, uh, therefore, it's no brainer that the function of risk management is main ammunition in the armory of security leadership, where business, technical, digital, or let's say reputational risks are first identified, they are then estimated, and subsequently their risk treatment options are determined. One more thing, and this is where the actual problem begins, that you see the audit findings are often helpful in the identification of risks in your security posture, and those are factored in your risk assessment as well. However, these findings are mostly centered on the existing security best practices, and they are not aware of the new techniques which are employed by cyber threat actors, and they do not always factor in the evolution of threats, or emerging trends, or the drivers that can potentially create any kind of a security risk. Those who are working within the industry can vouch for the fact that cyber threat landscape is often quite dynamic in nature at an operational or at a tactical level. So these things are extremely important to be factored in into your risk management as well. And sometimes there are strategic changes that are taking place into the broader threat landscape that needs to be counted in. So that is where the actual problem begins. So let me go back, let me take a moment to explain, to reinforce the stages which are involved in the risk management. So initially you have the risk assessment, which entails risk identification, risk analysis, and the risk evaluation. Then based on that, you determine what would be your right risk response, whether you would accept the risk, mitigate it, transfer it, or you will completely avoid the activity. And once you have decided upon the risk response options, then then you decide to monitor and to report the risk. And since this is a cyclical process, so this is how the cycle proceeds. While you're performing your risk identification, what happens is that you first try to determine what are your business goals and what are those assets, whether tangible or intangible assets, that are important to deliver that business goal or that business objective. And based on those assets, what are the underlying vulnerabilities to attached to those assets, and if there are any threats available that can exploit those vulnerabilities. So if there's a vulnerability but there is no corresponding threat, the risk does not materialize. And if there's no vulnerability, obviously the risk does not materialize either. So from your risk identification, you are basically creating the risk scenarios. And once you have created those risk scenarios, then based on that, you determine the risk estimations in which you perform. You determine the probability of an incident occurring, and then you determine that if the incident does occur, realize what would be the impact. So this is how you perform the risk estimation, or broadly a risk analysis. And based on that, based on your organization's risk appetite, you try to evaluate all the risks that you have identified and then subsequently determine the risk response options. So what happens is that the real problem comes when you are creating the risk scenarios and the risk estimations, and these two issues lead to risk perceptions. And this is where the crux of my argument lies. So let us dive in further to understand what are the challenges with the risk perceptions. So remember that risk perceptions are not unique to information security only. So and they span across a broader policy framework, which is not constrained within the organizations, within the private organizations only, but they also are prevalent in the government sector, where broad-based policies are formulated. A recent example of varying perceptions was seen during this COVID-19 pandemic amongst the health specialists and the government policymakers, between adopting a policy of stern lockdowns to prevent the health system from collapsing, while the other section had cautioned against the stern lockdown because it could have disastrous impact on the economy, and it could lead to other issues like hunger and poverty prevailing in the society. So you see there are varying perceptions of the risks that are common, and this is not unique to information security only. And these varying perceptions of risk obviously lead to varying estimations of risk. So, and therefore, risk professionals often overestimate and underestimate the risk scenarios which they have created. So, this leads to incorrect estimations of risk, and it further exacerbates the misperceptions of risk. This leads to a disastrous consequences, in the sense that the entire risk management process efficacy is doubted, and the process of risk management becomes a vulnerability itself. So and one more thing is that as organizations are engaging in risk assessment exercises, it is the availability of the data that is a primary factor to decide whether any organization would carry out a qualitative or quantitative or a semi-quantitative analysis. So if you have the hard data with you, hard numerical data with you, allows you to carry out that risk estimation, but depends from where you are gathering that data, what is the veracity of that data. That again is one factor that needs to be counted in. Misperceptions of risk often inflict the tendencies among the security risk professionals to apply a multitude of controls to establish and maintain a secure posture. However, it is important to remember that security controls create friction, and they affect the business velocity and pace. So remember, businesses exist only to achieve their goals, or the mission or the objectives, and not for the sake of establishing a stern security posture. Security controls are therefore supposed to be implemented to facilitate the organization in achieving their goals, or their objectives or the mission in a secure manner. That's the motto basically. And the purpose should be to maintain that equilibrium between a secure posture and allowing the business to grow, and grow in a sustainable manner and create value, which is the sole purpose of any business. So once the organizations adopt a threat centric approach, it keeps the risk management team fully aware of the potential methods of attack, or the motivations of various threat actors, or the cyber criminals that might be operating within the industry, or that may be targeting a particular industry vertical or a specific region. So this is where cyber threat intelligence can begin to provide benefit. So let us deep dive further to understand the issue. Now I have established my point that where exactly the problem lies. The problem lies with the lack of understanding of the emerging trends, or the existing trends that might be at play, and this leads to you know uh, creating the risk scenarios based on risk perceptions. And again, this is subjected, and subsequently your risk estimations are also subjected to certain to certain misperceptions. So let us see, where does cyber threat intelligence fit in. So cyber threat intelligence basically liberates the organization's risk management function from misperceptions by providing actionable intelligence, which can be used to select or design the associated controls. Uh, However, it's important that organizations first understand the various drivers and the trends which are associated to the threats in order to accurately subscribe to and consume the cyber threat intelligence. So, and once the organizations have this actionable intelligence readily available, uh, the organization becomes better equipped to protect their organizational assets, and it enables themselves to achieve their goals, or their objectives which are set out by their senior executive management. So while the information security risk professionals are creating the risk scenarios, it is important that they need to have at least the information related to these factors, which is like the existing trends or the drivers that are likely to affect the business in the short term or in the long term, and what are the threat actors that are targeting our industry vertical, or the region. Has there been a specific attack observed by other enterprises in the same industry, and what has been the nature or the pattern or the method of those threats or the attacks? Are there any vulnerabilities in our enterprise which have been exploited by threat actors somewhere else in any other organization? So these are the factors that need to be counted in. So Intel Corporation had presented a product lifecycle model back in 2012, and this is what I had professed in my paper as well. That it's a model for tracking the evolution of threats, and the model professes that many threats emerge as theoretical risks, and they progressively mature as their exploitability is demonstrated, and their proof of concepts become publicly available, and they are demonstrated over a period of time. And once their products are commoditized, it becomes far more easy for various threat actors, whether opportunistic or determined, to leverage those products and carry out their attacks in in the IT sphere. So this model helps to communicate the actionable information to the risk committees. It helps the risk committees or the security groups to determine when and where to allocate the budgets to deal with the identified threat based on its maturity and its likelihood to affect the enterprise. So if you check this table on the right side, so this product life cycle model, which is again taken from Intel, it groups the activity areas into four main clusters depending on their level of activity, their maturity potential, or their potential to impact the company. So if we take the example of sustained drivers, you have these areas of high impact or considerable concern. So see, no matter how technology evolves in the next 20 years or so, malware attacks or web attacks will remain prevalent because they are tools. They are broadly tools to carry out different kind of attacks. Maybe the nature of the malware itself would change, the purpose, the functioning of a specific malware would change, its mechanics would change, but malware would remain there. So this is essentially a part of a sustained trend that will remain over there, and this might be available in form of certain products that will be available to the threat actors to leverage in carrying out their attacks. Then secondly, you have the critical trends. Basically, as you see with the broader uh, you know uh, uh, devices that are being used to access the organizational infrastructure. Previously, I mean, let's say 15-20 years back, maybe the organization only allowed employees to access the IT infrastructure through their in-house, or through their own workstations or through their servers. But now you have organizations with their bring your own device policy. Organizational infrastructure can also be accessed through the personal devices, obviously through VPN, or by through BYOD as well. So right, with this you do see, this is an area that is undergoing active exploitation, and you have growing adoption beginning to shift towards the commoditization. So you will see active exploitation towards this side, with the broader inclusion of personal devices into the IT infrastructure. Then you go towards the emerging trends. So emerging trends are related to the cloud computing. So you see, as organizations move from capex to opex, so as the organizations begin to leverage the cloud resources, obviously the threat actors would try to see how they can take advantage or exploit any underlying vulnerabilities. Probably as we speak, there are low levels of exploitations available, as we have mentioned. So this activity may fall somewhere over here. And then the last, you have disruptive trends. So imagine what would be the impact of the virtualized infrastructure that will be used more aggressively in years to come by the organizations. What would be the level of exploitation that would be seen in years to come? So this Intel product lifecycle model, what it does is that it helps the organization understand the various trends and the drivers that they are embattled with. And by leveraging the cyber threat intelligence services, the organizations can determine how these threats are being materialized through different, let's say, tactics, techniques, and procedures, and what are the tools that are being utilized to carry out the attack. So such actionable intelligence provides the organizations valuable insight to develop their products or workflows with the principle of security by design and security by default. So this is a workflow that I had created myself. Remember that risk management is fundamentally a cyclical process. So while you are starting your risk assessment, you create your risk scenarios basically, and that is done during the risk identification. So while you are creating the risk scenarios, you need to better understand what are the sustained trends related to your industry vertical or to your region. What are the critical trends? What are the emerging trends or the disruptive trends that can potentially impact your organization or the assets that are responsible for delivering or achieving the business goals or the critical business goals. Once you understand these drivers or these trends, you can raise the relevant RFIs or request for intelligence to your cyber threat intelligence team. They can provide you with the strategic intelligence or broad-based intelligence, which will be more catered towards the senior management, but that can have its operative part and the tactical or the low level intelligence as well. So they can provide you this intelligence back, and based on that you can validate your risk scenarios, and based on that you can also perform risk estimations in a proper manner. So a specific example, of leveraging cyber threat intelligence in risk assessment appears when there is a need for a quantitative data, and this is where cyber threat intelligence can become even more handy. So if you check on underground cyber market, you have stolen information which is available, you have the assets which are available, you have the access to the networks and the assets which is often sold by various threat actors. And when you go to purchase this tangible or intangible asset, they have a numerical monetary value, and these numerical values provide insight to your information security risk management team, an understanding of the actual value that their assets may have, or the assets which may be equivalent in nature, and what might be the potential cost of varying levels of attacks. So and once you have these values, these numerical values which represent the monetary value of your asset, it provides your risk management team an opportunity to reflect back or revisit your estimation process and examine if the estimations that you had calculated before were they subjected to any misperceptions or not. This is where cyber threat intelligence can become really handy. One further example that I want to give is that of credit cards data that might be getting traded on the underground forums or various shops. So uh, once you have the intelligence, this kind of intelligence can provide you valuable insight on the actual value of your credit cards and the potential loss that you are going to incur due to the fraudulent transactions, uh, which may be because of the exposure of such data. So it can allow the risk management team to evaluate the cost of the reissuance of the new cards to their customers, and through a comprehensive risk analysis, a proper selection of controls can be made. This is about it. So as I had mentioned earlier, that you see risk management is essentially a linchpin or a cornerstone which sets apart individuals or the societies and the organizations from each other. However, if it's done in an offhand manner or in silos, then the entire risk management process can become a vulnerability itself, because it becomes a channel to waste or to spend the financial budget in an unintelligent manner. So therefore, an effectively functioning cyber threat intelligence program can strengthen the entire risk management function to deliver its objectives. So that's about it. I hope you found the session beneficial. If you have any questions, please feel free to raise them. I'll be more than happy to answer. You can contact me at my LinkedIn as well. I'll be more than happy to answer you. I'll request you to subscribe to our channel as well, and hit the bell icon below so that you get notified whenever there's a new video.